Welcome to session 3 of Poli 214, and it's titled States. We are going to look at the nature of states. In this session, the student will be introduced to the concept and origin of the state. You will learn about the rise of the modern state and types of state power levels in comparing state power. By the end of this session, you should be able to explain the concept and origin of the state to your friends, discuss the rise of modern states, and analyze and compare state power. The key topics covered are as follows. 1. Definition and origin of the state. 2. The rise of the modern state. And 3. Comparing state power. And you have a reading list with a different resource, and so I encourage you to get into it. Topic 1. Definition and origin of the state. What is the state in the first place? The concept of the state has attracted several definitions, you must note, from different authors. But one of the most popular definitions is the one given by Max Weber, a German scholar. According to Weber, a state is the organization that maintains a monopoly of violence over a territory. In other words, a state is an institution that seeks to wield the majority of force within a territory, establishing order and preventing challenges both from within and without. 4 key elements of a state are sovereignty, territory, citizens, and institutions. This means that any entity that has a defined territory, identified population, and governed by legitimate institutions with the power and ability to act independently can be described as a sovereign state. Some of the legitimate institutions of a state include the army, police, the judiciary, departments, and ministries. The state is different from a government or regime, you must note. Even though the 3 terms can be used interchangeably, they really mean different things. A regime actually refers to the rules and norms that guide a state's activities, particularly how its politics will be conducted, whereas a government is a leadership or political group in charge of managing the affairs of a state. Origin of the state. The state emanates from a simple and fluid gathering of people to a more organized system incorporating thousands and millions of people as one territory by a defined entity. Various groupings of tribes, bands, and countries transformed into one big organization called the state over time. So in other words, the state began from a simple and fluid gathering of people and became more organized with more and more people. And one of the most important aspects of this is having a defined territory or boundary that shows a difference between one state and the other. The need for human beings to domesticate plants and animals and agriculture forced societies to transform from a nomadic hunter-gatherer existence to one of sedentary lifestyle. This was the beginning of man's consciousness with the concepts of territory, crops, and homes. So along with agricultural growth and population expansion, unfortunately came inequality, which naturally had to be addressed by some form of authority. The state, therefore, emerged out of the need to have a political authority with a monopoly over the use of force to enforce law and order. Therefore, the state should be the only authority to control the military and army, to control the use of force. According to Thomas Hobbes, the English scholar, human beings entered into a social contract to to create a single political authority to overcome anarchy. The modern state today came out of the period of the Dark Ages in Europe after the collapse of the Roman Empire. Topic 2, the rise of the modern state. Now, the rise of the modern state, we have mentioned the state emerging out of the fall of the Roman Empire. And we want to note that the Roman Empire spread across Western Europe to North Africa and Egypt, and was a classic example of how large populations of human beings can be organized under a political system. The empire had an advanced infrastructure, beautiful cities, good roads, and most importantly, a central political authority. Pressure, unfortunately, from within the empire and from outside invaders led to the collapse of the Roman Empire. Now, this led to a period described as the Dark Ages, and the period was characterized by insecurity, weak infrastructure, and anarchy, where there was no authority to maintain law and order. The creation of the modern state. The modern state was thus created out of the anarchy and state of lawlessness following the collapse of the Roman Empire and the Dark Ages. Out of the disintegrated empire emerged smaller units of people who came together to protect their territory from invaders. Some of these units survived to become states, while others faded away. Now, the newly emerging states encouraged economic development to increase the welfare of the people. They encouraged technological innovation as well, including military technology, and also ensured domestic stability. So these were some of the elements of the modern state. These are some of the things the modern state did that differentiated it from the earlier political units. However, it was many years after the fall of the Roman Empire that the splinter units truly transformed into the modern state. It is commonly agreed that the modern state emerged after the signing of the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, which ended the 30-year war between the Roman Catholics and the Protestants in Europe. Topic 3, comparing state power. And first we look at legitimate power. States derive their power from various sources, we must remember. Legitimate power is where the state power relies not on coercion, but on consent. With political legitimacy, a state does not have to use the threat of force to ensure law and order. There are 3 types of political legitimacy. These are traditional legitimacy, charismatic legitimacy, and rational legal legitimacy. Traditional legitimacy is where state power is derived from conventional practice and acceptance of state authority from historical myths. An example of state power derived from traditional legitimacy is the power of a monarchy. In the African sense, or in the Ghanaian sense, an example of traditional legitimacy is the power derived from the chieftaincy institution. Charismatic legitimacy is where the state derives power from the power of ideas expressed by a charismatic leader. Finally, rational legal legitimacy is where the state derives power from an institutionalized system of laws and procedures. Most modern states, we must note, derive their power from this kind of legitimacy, rational legal legitimacy. This is because political leaders are elected and derive their powers from the Constitution, which is normally the highest law of the land. State power distribution. Different countries have different ways of distributing state power. However, the various ways of state power distribution can be classified into 2, namely centralization and decentralization. We mentioned this earlier. but we want to go into a little more detail. Centralization is where state power is concentrated at the national level, with the central government controlling most areas of policy. This is often common with what is known as unitary states. On the other hand, decentralization is where state power is devolved and dispersed to regional and local authority away from the national level. This type of state power distribution can be found in countries that practice federalism. Types of state power levels. This is very interesting. We want to note that states can be categorized into 3 main levels: strong states, weak states, and failed states. Now, your homework is to find out, research what examples, what states or countries in today's world are strong states, which ones can be classified as weak states, and which ones may be failed states. So strong states are states that are able to meet their obligation to their citizens in the area of safety and security, law and order, economic well-being, as well as protecting the territorial integrity of the country. So countries that are able to do that are regarded as strong states. And I'll give you 2 examples: the United States as well as China. Weak states are states that cannot ensure law and order, where there are competing rivals to the state's monopoly of the use of force, and where there is rampant corruption leading to mismanagement and underdevelopment of the economy. So we can put many developing countries here, including Ghana. But there are different levels of weak states. So some states are stronger weak states. I will put Ghana there. And others are very weak states. We can call very weak states states such as the Congo, DR Congo, for example, the Democratic Republic of Congo. A failed state is one in which there is total breakdown of law and order, and there is anarchy and violence. So at some point, Somalia in the 1990s could be regarded as a failed state. The same for Afghanistan in the 1990s and early 2000s. There are some questions for you to discuss. Conclusion. This session has examined the definition and origin of the state and discussed the rise of the modern state. Secondly, you should have become familiar with the types of state power levels and be able to decipher the different types of legitimate power. The next session will examine national identity, ethnic identity, and citizenship, as well as political attitudes and the different types of political ideology. So looking forward to that. Thank you very much.